Right, chaps, welcome back to the tube. Realistically, if you're a bloke or a woman, you've probably thought to yourself before, I wish I had some slightly bigger arms. So this session, I'm going to take you through exactly how to do that in the exercise that I've done now. Before we actually get into the session, there is one thing that I want to explain to you, and that is just because you're training arms does not mean that you should just try to get a pump when you go into your session. Just because it's a smaller muscle group doesn't mean that you should throw progressive overload out the window. The end goal is to progress these lifts, get stronger, add more reps over time, and that's what's going to grow your arms. You don't need to go in, be all pumpy and squeezy, move a lot of weight. That is the absolute foundational principle for absolutely everything we do in the gym. Okay, so on to the actual exercises. We've got 4 exercises today, and I'll walk you through each one in order. Starting off, we had a preacher curl. Now, I did this on a machine. Thought process behind this, first exercise, we want to get your bicep nice and short. So we want to get fully contracted, okay? So on a preacher curl, we know that your elbow, or your shoulder, is going to be in flexion. So your upper arm is going to be in front of your body. That's going to allow your bicep to get much more contracted because it crosses the shoulder joint as well. So if we can be in this position, right at the top, you're going to get a serious squeeze on your biceps and a very, very good contraction to start off the session. 3 sets here. 6 to 10 rep range I went for. Again, we're trying to load it up. We're trying to go heavy. None of this pumpy squeezy stuff. We just want to get strong at this movement. Keys here is just make sure you're aligned quite well. I should have probably done it single arm, to be fair, just to make sure I can get my shoulder, my elbow, and my wrist in a decent alignment. And then also just make sure your elbows are kind of in line with the pivot point of the machine. If you've not got something like that, you can quite easily just go for a dumbbell preacher curl where you'll set up on a bench in front of you, or you can just go for a easy bar curl on a preacher bench. That will work just as well. So ticks off the first exercise of biceps. Then we go on to the first tricep exercise. For this, again, we want to try and get your tricep nice and contracted, a movement that's going to make sure you get a good contraction in that tricep, drive some connection there before we go on to the rest of the exercises. So I went for a long rope tricep press down. Now, key is in the name, long rope, especially if you're moderately tall. Even if you're sort of like not even that tall, it's probably going to be ideal to use a longer rope. And the reason being is it allows you to get much, much better alignment. If you're using a short rope, you end up really crunched in, you don't get a very good contraction on your tricep, and everything is just misaligned. So get a long rope. If you've not got a long rope, you can get 2 normal ropes, pull them all the way through, and then connect them both onto the machine so that you create a longer rope for you. It's going to make a massive difference. I know one of my clients, Owen, that we did this with in an in-person session recently, complete game changer. The first time he's properly felt his triceps. So definitely give it a go with the long rope. The other key here is in the setup, just making sure I'm actually getting a good stretch on my tricep. You'll notice I'm leaning forward slightly so that there is actually still some load in that top position as opposed to it all just being in the bottom position. 3 sets here, once again, slightly higher rep range because if I go too low on this, sort of hurts my elbows. So I go for like a 8 to 12 rep range for the first 2 sets, and I did a 12 to 15 rep range for the final set. Next, on to the final exercise for biceps, the second exercise for biceps. I went on to a Bayesian curl, or a behind the back cable curl. You can see I've set this up, cables all the way at the bottom, and then really what I'm trying to do is make sure I've got some load in that stretch position. So we've gone from training that bicep in a contracted position on the preacher curl to training it in a slightly more lengthened position on the behind the back cable curl. Another key here, just making sure you've got a good stable base. You've actually walked outwards in front of the cables a fair bit, again, so that you can actually create some load in the bottom position. If your arm is in line with the cable as you're actually going into that stretch, there's not going to be any load through your biceps. So you actually want to make sure there's still an angle between the cable and between your arm when you're doing this set at the bottom of that movement to make sure there's still some load going through there. Again, 3 sets here. I went for a 6 to 10 once again for the first set, and then the second 2 sets, just to work in a slightly higher rep range, I went for a 10 to 15 so that we've got a bit of a mix of both throughout the whole session. Then the final movement to finish off is a tricep movement. Same idea with the bicep. We went from short to lengthened. On the triceps, we've gone from short with the long rope tricep press down to a stretch position in the overhead single arm cable tricep extension. So you can see the setup here. I'm basically facing away from the cable, so the cable is actually behind me. My upper arm is overhead, and once again, I'm just trying to get a really nice stretch on the tricep, getting nicely overhead, and then driving through from there. A couple of keys here. Once again, make sure you've got a stable base, because stability is absolutely king on this exercise and every other exercise. And also from a setup perspective, just make sure that that cable is as close to your body as possible. If you're not set up right, it's going to feel really awkward. It's going to feel like it's pulling you in the wrong directions. So set up, cable pretty close to your body. It should feel like it's almost dragging along your back as you're going into the overhead position. And then do your best to just keep the upper arm as still as possible, to make sure the only thing that's actually moving is the lower arm, so that you're just moving that elbow and just training that triceps. 3 sets once again, and then this one was 3 sets of 10 to 15. Again, just to protect my elbows a little bit, but still get some really good work through there. So 6 sets total per muscle group, biceps and triceps. You probably don't need much more than this. Maybe you could go up to 8. At a push, go up to 10. But realistically, when you're doing that 9th, 10th set, it's probably going to be significantly less productive than the first. So if you're doing that, I'd probably just spread out the arm volume across the week a little bit more. Maybe you train it 2 to 3 times a week, 6 sets per muscle group per session. That's going to be a great starting point. So give this session a go if you want some outrageously large arms. And actually, if you want a free arms accelerator toolkit, I guess you could say, we've actually made this. So there's a link below. You can access the arms accelerator. It's going to give you a full program that takes you through how to grow some chunky, big arms. That's all everyone wants. Fill those sleeves, brothers. Hopefully you found this video helpful, and I'll speak to you soon. Ciao.